So, one of the greatest challenges that we see many entrepreneurs face, especially the ones whom English is their second language, is communication, presentation, public speaking, pitching on a daily basis. These are very important activities, yet very challenging for many. And without having the right and necessary skills, we can't really go that far in our work or in our own business. And that's why we have decided to dedicate this episode of On Point just to communication and to hear from an expert all about it, about how we can do better and improve our communication. All good. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we're finally having you on this episode of On Point, and I'm super excited about this conversation, as you can see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like one of the reasons why that I very much value this topic is I think almost anyone can benefit from the topic that we're going to discuss today, and even apply right away some of the techniques and some of the things that we're going to discuss today to their day-to-day life, even, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, that's the idea. I pick entrepreneurs as a sort of niche in order to market, but really, of course, it's anybody can benefit from this. This is how we communicate as human beings. We talk to one another and we try to present our ideas and tell stories about what we want to do in the world and get other people to come on board. So really, if you're talking to your kids, if you're talking to your spouse, if you're talking to colleagues and partners at work, you got to know how to talk. And if you don't, life is going to be so much harder. So yeah, for sure.
That's true. Exactly. So before the start of a conversation and off this call, basically, I give a quick introduction about our guests, but I really want the audience to hear from you and learn from you about you, and to know exactly like what really inspired you to coach in this particular area in this first place. And I know you have an exciting story, so let's just see and hear it from yourself.
Yeah, well, I started as an actor as a young child because my parents were in the business. My dad was a director and a writer and an actor, and my mom was a writer and a theater director, and my older sister was starting to do plays and stuff at the age of 10. So she had an agent, my sister, and my agent knew our family so well because she also represented my dad. So this big American feature film audition came in for my sister, and my agent, as a joke, sent my dad an email being like, haha, would your son want to audition for this little part for this boy in the movie,
Interesting.
for this little boy? And my parents knew what the business was like, so they were kind of like, they didn't want me to do that as a career
Yeah.
because they know how hard it is to make money unless you're super successful. So they said, do you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, I want to do it. I'm a kid, I had no idea, I just wanted to copy my family and my
Yes,
older
of course.
sister. And so I did it, and I got the part, which was a lead in a major American feature film right away, like the first thing I
Oh
ever
my
auditioned for.
God.
And so it just started this
That's
acting
amazing.
career out of nowhere as a child. So I didn't know what it meant or what it was or how much money I was making or what, I just knew that it was really
Yeah.
fun and it seemed exciting and I really enjoyed the work. And so I kept acting all through my childhood and doing film and TV. And then when it came time to get an education, I was like, oh, great. I'm going to go to theater school and become an actor. Like, what else am I going to do? I already have my career picked out.
Yeah.
But right before I went to theater school, my family kind of had a tragedy and my younger brother passed away. And it
Oh,
completely kind of, derailed my life plans. And I just
so
wasn't
sorry to hear
happy
that.
anymore. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason I tell this story is because it's really heavy, but I don't believe you can
Change your
separate
journey.
these life events.
Yeah.
Yeah. Without telling that full story. So when this happened to me,
Hmm.
I kind of became a different person, and I started looking at my life and going like, I don't know if I want to be an actor. This doesn't actually
Hmm.
really make me happy. I'm just kind of doing it because I've always done it. And because I was still kind of so in grief and not knowing what I wanted to do with my life, I ended up just kind of running away. So I went to
Yeah.
Spain just to try to get away from, my hometown, myself. And then I started teaching and I realized, oh, I really like doing this and I like connecting with people and helping them make breakthroughs. So I was teaching English,
Hmm.
but I loved it. And then the English teachers and some friends of mine that I was working with there, we decided to start a school in China as a wholly foreign owned enterprise. So we went to China. We had no idea what we were doing. I started my first company with no idea of what entrepreneurship was or how to do it properly. And it was a
Hmm.
complete mess, but I learned like so much about what not to do and how to run a
Yeah.
business from making all the mistakes in the book. When I came back to Canada after this startup kind of fizzled out, I thought, okay, what am I going to do with my life? And then my acting mentor, who had helped me get into theater school, invited me to see this class that she was teaching at U of T. And she was helping grad students, most of whom were not native English speakers, try to
Hmm.
make sense of their scientific presentations because they had these crazy
Interesting.
complicated science, and they were pitching for like $2 million. These were research grants of $2 million. So it was so
Hmm.
important that they present well, but they couldn't get their message out there. So
Yeah.
she invites me to this class, and I'm sitting there and I'm watching how she's working with them, and I'm like, this is what I do with my English
Yeah.
students. I don't spend a lot of time with vocabulary and grammar because they can learn that at home out of a book. When
Exactly.
they're with me, I want to help them communicate, because
Hmm.
if I spend 10 minutes with them on the way they communicate and give them a couple changes, they're going to transform the way they talk and the way people receive
Exactly.
them, how clear they are, how much of an impact they make on people is going to transform in just a little bit of key advice and ways to get over certain things that are holding them back and pointing out certain
Hmm.
things that nobody's ever told them. So
Exactly.
we went into business together about 7 years ago. And so the rest has just been an amazing ride. My second company, and yeah, now we've worked with some of the biggest entrepreneur accelerators in North America, like Google for Startups and Techstars and DMZ. We've run over 20 cohorts of our accelerator pitch program for them, and it's all about helping them present, tell stories, and be more confident in their own skin as they have these conversations that really drive business forward. And we do a lot of corporate work as well, but to me, which is great and it pays the bills, but that's not my true passion. My true passion is working with
Working with
founders.
entrepreneurs. Yes, of course. And I remember the first time you told me, I learned that about you, that you worked with, you had actually ESL students in the past. I got very excited about it. And the reason for it is honestly, it truly demonstrates that you have gained basically an in-depth understanding of the highlighting challenges of these individuals, common challenges that international entrepreneurs are facing on a daily basis. And that can become a huge hurdle and it limit them in a variety of ways, in different ways. And you knowing that and learning that about them and having that sympathy, I'm sure it has its own. It's been useful in helping you become this amazing coach for even international and immigrant entrepreneurs in your journey.
Yeah, I think it's very important what you mentioned about having sympathy, because I
Yeah,
think, I mean, you'll know this better than me, but when people come to a new country, it's hard for the locals to really imagine what the immigrant is going through.
exactly.
The
Yeah,
locals wake up in a country where they know how everything works. They know who they can call if they need something. They know how to go where all the stores are. They know, where the best prices of different things are. They know what all the food they like to eat is. They can speak the language fluently, and they know all the
yeah,
cultural customs, what is expected of them, what is rude, what is polite. They have all that knowledge just that they've learned. When you go to a new
yeah,
country, and I learned this in Spain and then in China, especially in China, that was like a really big culture shock because it's so different from Canada.
hmm,
You don't have any of that.
exactly.
You go from 100% understanding to 0% understanding, and
Hmm.
that's what culture shock. That's why they call it shock. It is a shock to the system, and I think just having my own experience in other countries with that, and then also teaching so many students and hearing them tell me about how people make fun of their accents, how people don't take them seriously because of their language skills, the fear that they have just internally about speaking up in a meeting or volunteering to give a presentation at work, how they get stuck in their job, trying to climb the ladder if they're in the corporate world, or how they're not getting funding and people aren't understanding their ideas
Yeah,
if they're pitching to investors and customers. I mean, I really feel like even though I'm not an immigrant to Canada, I have a much better understanding than maybe a lot
of
of
course.
Canadians who haven't been through this experience or talked to enough immigrant entrepreneurs to Canada to know that
Yeah.
massive emotional toll that it takes on somebody. And of course, and everybody listening who is an immigrant entrepreneur knows this already. I'm kind of speaking to the
Hmm.
people in Canada who aren't thinking about this. And
No, that's
unfortunately,
true.
making judgments about these entrepreneurs or these people that aren't true. Because if you hear somebody speak your language and it's not as good as you are, you think, oh, this person isn't as smart as me, when that's not true. And if anything, they're much
Exactly.
smarter than you, but they aren't able to represent that in your language in the same way. So yeah, that frustrates me a lot. But I am glad, because it does allow me to help ESL entrepreneurs, I think, much better than maybe some other coaches, which is great,
Yeah, and
right?
I
Because that's who
see,
I like working.
yeah, and I see a lot of, so we have a lot of entrepreneurs in Bay&Co that are struggling with the same thing and eventually like working on that communication skills. And all we do is pushing them to go out there. And in lots of cases, when they're trying to get help from individuals, like in any ways, like any kind of services or not necessarily communication, but other areas, one thing that you mentioned is exactly they don't not having the understanding of what your true challenges are, they can't really help you out there. Like you have to be able to know the root cause of it, like where is it coming from, how you can address it
Yeah.
to be able to help them in that specific areas. And I'm sure, as you said, your experience has helped you. You yourself experienced that in the other country, so that was very useful and definitely very helpful for them. So, in your experience, Will, what are the common challenges and common mistakes that you see often these immigrant entrepreneurs or foreign entrepreneurs are facing? And let's talk about that a little bit to elaborate more on it.
Yeah, I think one of the number one things is just understanding the cultural differences, the cross-cultural communication barriers. I get that
Hmm.
question a lot. And so the idea is like, let's say we're taking somebody from Korea or from Iran or from China, and there are often differences even in what is considered respectful talking, respectful public speaking. In North America, in Canada and the US specifically, there is what I think Susan Cain describes as a culture of charisma or a culture of personality, meaning you are
Hmm.
expected to be big and confident and loud to be considered important or cool
Yeah.
or well respected. But in some other countries, it's actually kind of seen as a bit obnoxious or arrogant, to walk into a room and be
Yeah.
like, everybody look at me. And so that can be really tough. And it can be tough going the other way too. Like if you go to China
Yeah.
as a white person and you're just like taking up so much space, people are going to be like, fuck you, like you have to learn to adapt
Yeah.
wherever you are. But then of course, people from Asia or other countries where there's more of a sense of a collective identity and less of a look at me, I'm an individual and I'm better than everyone else. It can be
Hmm.
hard to give enough confidence in your audience that you are a strong, powerful person.
Right.
So if we
Interesting.
see an entrepreneur who is too quiet or too humble or doesn't take up space physically, in North America, we have a judgment that they are not
I
a
see.
forceful enough personality to grow a company or to
And
get more
assertive enough to
customers,
push for
not
it.
assertive enough to push for what they want, to negotiate for what they want, and just to spread their message. And then, of
Hmm.
course, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because if you stand in front of 5 investors and don't show your personality, then they might not invest in you. Then you don't have
Right.
that opportunity to go on that next stage and talk to 30 investors. And then you don't have that next opportunity to go talk to a stadium full of 5,000 people at a conference. And that, so there's this self-fulfilling prophecy where if people perceive you as not worthy of attention,
Hmm.
then you become unworthy of attention just by virtue of not getting those opportunities that attention brings. And
Hmm.
so one of the first challenges is just being loud enough, clear enough, and expressive enough. I kind of call it putting on like an American jacket. So I help a lot of ESL figures with this. I say, just put on this American jacket. It doesn't mean you need to talk to everybody like this. It doesn't mean you need to call your
Hmm.
parents in China on FaceTime and start talking to them like this. But it means
Imagine
when it's
that.
time to present, yeah, exactly. They'd be like, why are you being so rude? Like, but when it's time to present or you're in a meeting or you have a pitch to investors, you put on this
Hmm.
American jacket and you're louder, you're more emotional, you're more confident, and you're more physically, facially, and vocally expressive than you normally
Hmm.
feel comfortable doing. And this jacket concept has helped so many people just because it's like, okay, I just put it on and then I know that I can do this physically, I can do this vocally, and I just seem more confident and I seem more authoritative and assertive, and it works wonders. Both internally, they feel better, and they get better feedback from their investors and from the people listening.
I see.
So
So you're
that's one
defining
challenge.
one. Okay, so it's about the
Yeah,
culture. So the culture drives that, and they have to like kind of figure that out and try to fit in more.
exactly. So yeah, that's the challenge and the solution is
Yeah.
understanding North American culture. And one of the biggest ways to understand North American culture is that we tend to have a bias towards people who are big, loud, and confident in
Mm-hmm.
general.
Right.
Obviously, different people are different. Another
Mm-hmm.
challenge that they have is that they want to sound fluent, so they talk too fast.
I see.
It's so interesting because I get this too. When I was in Spain and China, I'd be like, okay, when I'm speaking, once I got a good handle on the language, I would say, I want to speak as fast as I can. Because if I speak fast, it
Mm-hmm.
shows how good I am at the language. It shows my fluency.
Right.
I don't want to pause because then maybe they think I don't know the language well enough. But that gets us in trouble because everybody should slow down a little bit when they're
Exactly.
trying to make, like I'm trying to do that right now just to communicate my ideas with you and with the audience. My natural desire is to speak really, really quickly, get excited and fire rapid ideas. But I have to
Yeah.
understand that as the audience, that may be too fast, maybe too much.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of trying to impress people with your English, impress people with your clarity of speech and your powerful ideas. That's more impressive. I'd rather
That's
listen to
turning point.
somebody, yeah, I'd rather listen to somebody speak maybe intermediate English with powerful ideas than really advanced English but saying nothing. You hear this from native English speakers all the time. The intellectual, metaphysical properties of our epistemological, you're just nothing. You're saying nothing, and
Yeah.
you think you sound important. You think you sound cool. You think you're saying something, but your no meaning is being transmitted. You're just talking in what you think are impressively long and complex sentences. So I'd
Yeah.
say the solution to this challenge is don't be afraid to slow down, take pauses, and really speak clearly and loudly and say what you mean. And don't be afraid to be simple. Use simple vocabulary as well, because that's what's more powerful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Two challenges. Okay, I'm going to give you one more. Sorry, I know I'm speaking a lot here, but
No, no, it's amazing. Just
okay.
to
Good.
make a note on your previous point, not
Yes.
only in the speaking, I see that actually what you mentioned very often in even writing. I think it was a few days ago we got it was a pitch deck I think from one of our potential entrepreneurs, and I had a chance of knowing the idea in advance because one of the co-founders mentioned and pitched it in the past. But reading that in writing, I got back to them and I was like, these are all fancy vocabularies. You definitely use ChatGPT, which is totally fine. But using
Yeah.
ChatGPT and make it fancy enough, it doesn't mean that I'm going to understand you. Like if you send this
Yes.
and pitch this to
Yeah.
somebody else, they don't even understand anything for me to give you even a chance. So what you're saying, it can definitely reflect it to any sorts of communication, including
Yes.
speaking, including writing, and yeah, we all need to be cognizant of that.
And one more piece to add to this that I think a lot of founders struggle with is that you kind of have to build a personal brand these days in order to get your company noticed. And that
Exactly.
sucks for a lot of founders who are introverts or who are technically minded or who just don't want to be on LinkedIn or
Hmm.
Instagram for very good reasons because it
Yeah,
sucks in a lot of ways.
exactly.
Emotionally, it's a lot of time and energy and emotional drain, but it's such a good way to get free advertising. And not only that, it's a great way to get your ideas and your personality out there. So I've had
Hmm.
some success with it for my own brand, but I've also helped other founders start to see the value and start to get success with that. So when you're thinking about writing for something like LinkedIn, or some people will do a Medium or a Substack and then they'll share that
Hmm.
on Twitter, or they'll just use Twitter, but all of these are very legitimate ways to find investors, to have investors find you, to have customers find you, to have partners find you, to have potential talent when you're ready to hire find you.
Hmm.
And when you're writing, again, yes, way better to be short, clear, and simple, but just with powerful ideas than to use lots of fancy words and not get the idea transmitted. You're not there to
Hmm.
impress people with your vocabulary. You're there to get an idea out.
Hmm. You know, like how it is that we all, lots of us have to present on a daily basis to our colleagues, to our managers, and pitch to our potential investors, customers, or even have to publicly speak in front of a crowd. And I want to know, in your opinion, is there any techniques or any specific key elements that can contribute to having a success in these type of activities?
Yeah, I think about this all the time because I always think, okay, what's the simplest tips and techniques I can give people to like get the quickest results that they want?
Yeah.
And so I kind of break it down into content and delivery. And with content, I have a number one exercise, and with delivery, I have a number one exercise. So let's just talk about content first because I can't remember who said this, but it was something, there was a coach who said something like, why would I rehearse and practice a badly written speech? Because it's not going to save it. And
Hmm.
David Mamet, who wrote a book called True and False, which is one of the best books on acting advice I think that's ever been written, he said, good acting can't save a bad script. So it doesn't matter how well you perform. If the writing is not good, it's not going to land on the audience. So
Well said.
first, make
Yes.
sure your content is in order. So the best way to
Hmm.
do that, first, we've talked already about simplifying the writing. That's really important. But before you even start writing, you need an idea and a structure, right? And
Hmm.
another thing we need to learn is that human beings respond to stories. Story is one of the most fundamental ways we have of giving each other information. So you got to tell a story. The simplest way to do that is talk about a problem, show your solution, and then describe a prize. I call it problem, solution, prize. The
Hmm.
problem is what you're here today to talk about. If it's your company, it's the main problem you solve for your market. If you're presenting at work, it's the reason that we are all having this meeting. Something is wrong, otherwise we wouldn't be talking, or something needs to
Yeah.
be discussed, or there's an opportunity. But opportunity, problem, what or whatever is kind of the main thing. And if you can phrase it in a problem, it's just stronger than opportunity.
Hmm.
Solution is what do you know? What can you do? What do you have to offer that can fix this problem? Again, for entrepreneurs, that's your product or service.
Hmm.
For executives, that's your main idea or that's your corporate protocol that they've told you to pass down to your team. The thing we're going to
Hmm.
be focusing on this quarter. If you're a junior person in a corporate company, it's this recommendation you have to your higher ups that you think that they should take to fix whatever problem is happening. Then
Hmm.
finally is the prize. And this is where most people forget to add the prize. What happens after we do the solution? How does life get better? And this is different from benefits. The benefits are, okay, this will work faster, this will be better, it's easy to do, it's a little help, but the prize is like we move in a towards a better world. So it's a little
Hmm.
more aspirational, it's a little more high level. How does this make our company
Visionary.
better? And it's yeah, visionary, exactly. Vision is often a great synonym for prize. You can say my
Hmm.
vision for the future or the prize, but it should seem like a prize. It should seem like a future worth fighting for and a future
Exactly.
worth doing the work needed. So coming up with your problem and being able to clearly state it, then coming up with your proposed solution, and then coming up with the prize and using that as the story structure. And you can also think of the problem as your introduction, the prize as your conclusion, and then the most of the middle can be the solution. How it
Hmm.
works, different angles, what objections people might have to it, like, well, is it going to be difficult, is it going to be expensive? And most of the meat of the presentation can be talking about different angles of your solution, and then the problem is your intro and the prize is your conclusion. So
Hmm.
that's the content. I hope that wasn't too much
Yeah,
information.
no, totally. So it totally fits the storytelling that you mentioned, even for this specific concept. You're saying basically your story would be, here we are today, and here we can be. Look how amazing this
Hmm.
is. And here is the journey to get there, which is basically your
Yes,
solution and helps you with
that's
telling your
it.
story perfectly.
That's it. There's
Okay.
so many different people have different ways of describing this. I just saw a guy on YouTube describe that as a bridge between two islands. Island A is where you are now. It's like not a lot of food, not a lot of water. It's kind of gross. Island B is like this tropical paradise. So you have to show that you have the bridge to get there. So that's
Yeah.
another way to think about it. But that's a
That's
great
amazing. I
point.
think of, since we mentioned public speaking, we know that that can be a nerve-wracking experience for many. And I'm curious to know if you recommend any techniques or specific exercises that can help individuals who are struggling with nervousness or stage fright to overcome it, and help you with them. Any advice to take into account?
Yeah, again, I want to give practical stuff that you can use right away. Like I want you to
Perfect.
be able to have something that you can go away with. So the best thing to do from a physical exercise is just to make sure that you're breathing into your belly. So you've seen me do this, I think, at startup drinks and different
Yes.
events in Toronto. You put one hand on your chest, under your collarbone, and you put your other hand on your belly button, and you just breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And you just notice which hand moves more that's on your body. Is it the top hand on your chest, or is it the bottom hand? It
Hmm.
should be the bottom hand. Because if the top hand's moving, you're going like
I
this.
see.
And that creates tension.
And lots
And
of
also,
tension. Yeah.
yeah, and your lungs are actually don't have a lot of volume. It's the bottom of your lungs that really fill up. That's where most of the volume of the lungs is.
Hmm.
So you want to breathe into the belly so that your
Hmm.
lungs can really expand at the bottom, because your abdominal wall goes out. The diaphragm, which is that muscle that sits under your lungs, can go down, and the bottom of your lungs can really fill up. When you fill your lungs with
Hmm.
oxygen, you feel calmer. When your belly loosens, you feel calmer, because it sends a signal to your brain. We're fine. Everything's fine. I don't need to,
Yeah.
because when you're not fine, you go, you hyperventilate. But when you are fine, you go,
Hmm.
that's why meditation works so well too, to calm you down, because you're really focusing on breathing
Yeah.
deeply. So that's the practical thing, is you just train yourself to breathe into your belly. And then when you're on stage or you're about to go on stage, you just focus, belly breathing. Belly breathing. I was going on stage for opening night of a play I was in just before COVID, and I was having a mini
Hmm.
panic attack off stage. I was like, can't remember any of my lines. I'm gonna fuck this up. I'm so scared. And I was like,
Yeah.
wait a second, remember what you teach people. Like, don't take your own advice.
Yeah.
So I just did belly breathing, and it saved me. It got me confident enough to go on stage and do my job. And it's not to
Hmm.
be underestimated. It's very powerful stuff. The other part to that is
Hmm.
your mental talk, what you're saying to yourself in your head. The best way I know how to do this is through CBT exercises, cognitive behavioral therapy. Have you heard of this? Yeah.
Yes.
There's a great website called positivepsychology.org, I think. We can put it in the show notes. I get
We will do that.
so many
Yeah.
exercises from it. They just have all these great exercises. You just kind of write down what you're thinking, and then you write down, what kind of a thought is this? And it's such a great way to start to look at your own thoughts and challenge them. Because when we're anxious, the thought,
Hmm.
okay, so Malika, when was the last time you had a stage fright or an anxiety or something before a pitch or presentation?
I have actually one in on the top of my head. I think it was a few months ago, which it was I don't it was without any reason. Like I did not even expect it to get that feeling right away. I think it was in front of the crowd and we all had to say something. And when it came to me, I was totally ready and everything was fine. And suddenly I got this panic attack as the microphone was getting closer
Yeah.
to me. And I had to like suppress it and overcome it and say, why the hell are you feeling like this? Like you should not be feeling like this right
Yeah.
now. But as I think as soon as you said, I started like thinking logically about like you should not be feeling this way, and starting my first sentence, the rest, followed. I think that's the first thing. If you can overcome that, like a few seconds of it, the things get better. If you have noticed with your students, but that for me, that was the most recent one.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is it's not just with public speaking that this is true. There's something I think called the 2-minute rule. I don't know if you follow Ali Abdal on YouTube or LinkedIn, but he's a
No, I
pretty
don't.
fantastic resource for he's like kind of a productivity guru, but his stuff is much more interesting than that. It's all about how to like build a personal brand and a business around doing stuff that you love and being more productive, and he just has really great videos, and he's a kind of a lovely guy to watch. He's got a very great personality, great person just to learn speaking skills from, because he
Hmm.
communicates very well. But he was talking about a 2-minute rule, which is that psychologists have realized that the first 2 minutes of a task is always the hardest. Once you start, it gets
Right.
easier. So it's not just public speaking, it's really any task. And I think people will notice this about like
Yeah.
writing or doing their taxes or like whatever they don't want to do that they're procrastinating. Once they start, it's much easier. So that's a great thing to remember. It's
Exactly.
a great thing to tell yourself, going, okay, I'm nervous. That doesn't mean I'm going to be nervous for the whole thing. I just have to get over this first bit. But what you also did, which was so good, is you logically told yourself something that went against what your emotions were feeling. You used logic to counter your emotional reaction. And that's what anxiety and stage fright is. It's an emotional reaction. That doesn't mean it's wrong, but that does mean that by definition, it's not rational. Our emotions are the opposite of rationality. So we can use rationality to counter our emotional reactions. So when that microphone was coming to you, you probably had thoughts and feelings that were like, the thoughts were, oh my God, I'm going to sound stupid. There's so many people watching me. They're going to judge me. Does that sound right?
I was gonna say, like, I think the first thing that gives you that kind of nervousness is like, I want this to be perfect, and I'm not sure if I can deliver my best at this very
Yeah,
moment, right? You have to like be logical about it and overcome it.
exactly. So in CBT, this stuff I was talking about trains that. The best thing that I use and teach is called the triple column technique. And in the first column, you write down a negative thought you've had, like, I want this to be perfect, and I don't think I can do it. That's a negative thought. Then you look at what is the logical fallacy or the cognitive distortion, they call it. Basically, what's the mistake that you're making by thinking that? In this case, the mistake, as CBT would say, is fortune telling, because you're predicting the future. I don't know if I don't think I can deliver it. How do you know? Maybe you're going to do it amazingly, right? So we would write down in the middle column, that's fortune telling. That's the mistake. And then in the third column, we write down the rational counter argument, or what I like to call best friend advice. If your best friend had this thought about themselves, what would you say to them? So if your best friend, Melika, says, oh, I want this to go great and I'm not sure I can deliver that, what would you say to him or her?
You're great. Go for
You're
it. You
great.
can do your
You're going to be
best. I'm
great.
pretty
You're going
sure.
to be great.
I'm sure, not even
Yeah, I'm
kidding.
sure you're going to be great. We always say that to our friends, but we can't say it to ourselves, right? We never know how to speak to ourselves with the same love and support and encouragement that we do with our friends.
Self-sabotaging.
We say the worst shit to ourselves, stuff we would never dream of saying to another human being. You know, it's crazy how we talk to ourselves. And I do this too. And I realized that when I started doing CBT, and it was like a real life-changing thing for me to start to realize how hard I am on myself, how mean and harsh my self-talk is. And that starting to counter it with these rational arguments, I was like, oh man, this just feels better. I feel more confident, and I feel it also helps with imposter syndrome, which is where some stage fright comes from. So if you can use CBT exercises to help against imposter syndrome, that will really help you with your career.
For sure. That was such a great advice. I think for me, throughout my career, I got this opportunity, and I was surrounded by such a great crowd in my career. I had great leaders and managers and mentors. And I eventually switched my focus, as you mentioned, from my language skills, whatever, to coherence, being clear, being smart about the solutions, offering your best. They can just make sure that they understand you. I started using visualization, some things. I was good at design, so I was presenting my idea in multiple ways to make it more clear till I got, more confident with myself, and eventually I got there. But I understood that it's not about what you said, about having the perfect presentation, having the perfect communication style all the time, having the good one and trying to, improve at it and take one step at a time, and don't be too picky and put that perfectionism aside. No, nobody's perfect. Nothing is perfect. You just have to create that human connection and make them understand you. So
You just nailed it. You
yeah,
absolutely nailed it with create that human connection. That's all that matters. Did the
yeah,
people you speak to want to know more about you and maybe keep following you or talking to you or connecting with you? That's your only job. Because let's say you're pitching
exactly.
to investors. You're not going to get a check from the first 3-minute pitch you give them, or 7-minute pitch, whatever it is. They're not going to just write down a
Totally,
check for $1
exactly.
million because you spoke to them for 3 minutes. So you don't have to think about it as like, oh my God, if I don't get this perfect, I'm damaging all my chances at getting their money. So I've got to just tell them my whole business in 3 minutes perfectly. No,
Exactly.
you just have to give them, and you have to create enough of a human connection that's like, does this person do I want to even ever see them again? And that's not a high bar to clear. You just have to be
Yeah.
warm and as you said, coherent, and somebody will want to probably talk to you again. And then you have to have a good enough idea, like, or at least be good enough at communicating your idea. Because there's a lot of great ideas out there, but they just aren't communicated well. And that's what kills them. It's not the idea.
Exactly.
And all you're trying to do as a presenter is accomplish a very specific goal. And it's actually really worth defining that goal. Very worth it before you go in. What do I want my audience to do when I'm done talking? And what that does is it takes the focus off, I want to be impressive, I want to be cool, I want them to think I'm smart, I want them to think I'm well-read and researched and authoritative, to I want them to give me their email so that I can send them my pitch deck. Or I want them to click on this link that I'm sharing so that they can get in touch with me. As simple as that. And then it's not like, oh, how do I make myself so impressive and cool and clear? It's, have I done just enough to make them interested? That's all you got to do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it makes it so much more lower stakes. I always talk about this. Whatever you can do as a public speaker to lower the stakes of your talk, the better. We think that we need to be really anxious to do a good job, but it's the opposite with public speaking. Maybe a little anxiety just so that you have some energy, but like mostly just try to convince yourself that you're having a conversation with people, and it'll be so much better than if you try to give a big, loud, special performance. That whenever I try to do that, it's never as good as when I'm just really honest and present and lowering the stakes for myself.
Authentic. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes, as you said, you might even, under some circumstances, you don't even talk about your big business ideas. Maybe that specific conversation is not even just for that. You have to be able to read the room and understand that it's all about that connection. Because once this is something that I often say to entrepreneurs at Bay&Co, that focus on selling yourself, creating that connection, because once you can demonstrate your worthiness of their time, attention, and interest, the rest comes naturally. It's not a difficult job. And sometimes you have to like leave the conversation without even talking about that big business and let it for another conversation.
Yeah.
All great point, and thank you very much. I want to put the communication talk aside, and just my last topic that I want to discuss with you is about your business. I know Will Greenblatt is the co-founder and CEO of Applied Speakers School, and I have two questions for you. One is, I just came up with it because I got very curious about it, and I know we talked about it in the past, but I didn't think we talked about the full picture. And it's, what's your vision for this school? And where do you think, towards what direction you think you hope to drive and move the company?
So the point of it was always, how can we get actors to be teaching business people how to be better performers and storytellers? That was always the vision for the company. And what I'm realizing now is that I don't think it just has to be actors. But it does need to be people who have performance and storytelling experience in education, because there are some real fundamental principles at play here. Do you know what it's like to be on stage telling stories? Do you have deep experience with that? Do you know how a good story is created? Do you know how people receive information and communication? So I've just kind of opened up my definition of who can be a coach. And I'm starting to think a lot bigger in terms of like who can be a coach. I will say that I feel like I've learned about myself, trying to grow an agency with as many coaches as possible is not what I want to do, because it just means that I have to be a CEO of a massive company full of people. And that's not what I love to do. What I love to do is coaching. So I'm deciding to keep the company, at least in this version, for the next year or so, small and lean, and just focus on how can I scale myself and the coaching that I do as large as I can. And so that's what I'm looking at right now is, how can I get more clients, especially more early stage entrepreneurs? Because I work with a lot of seed and Series A founders. They've got a bit of money. They've raised already, right? So they can pay me, and they're raising a lot of money. So they can pay me $4,000, $5,000 to work with them. And because it's going to pay back so much with the amount of money they're raising.
Of course.
But with an early stage founder, they don't have that kind of budget, and they can't just throw thousands of dollars at a speaking coach. So what I want to do for them is create more scalable products and lower cost courses, and especially like asynchronous courses. So I'm looking at a few different things. I'm looking at starting a YouTube channel, which will just be free content, right? And do kind of long videos. That's what I do with my LinkedIn stuff, is I try to provide as like much value as I can on LinkedIn, so that anybody who just follows me will get some tips. I'm doubling down on my newsletter. So I'm writing like a, 1,200 to 1,500 word sort of essay about my own thoughts about being a better entrepreneur and public speaker. And then I'm starting to do low-cost workshops. So I'm doing a workshop at 111. I'm doing this monthly now. And so the next one is on March 20th. So if anybody's in the Toronto area, you want to come downtown, the workshop is on March 20th. We can put it also in the show notes if people are interested. And that's like the low-cost way of coming in, giving me your pitch, hearing my feedback. So I'm trying to scale up in that way. And then my core business will be focused on seed stage founders and taking them through my whole program so that they can just become powerful public speakers. So not just pitching to investors, but selling, doing founder-led sales, having the big, sales conversations, being really confident on who they are and their story for that. And then also content marketing, doing video and writing on LinkedIn. And starting to build that presence online. So those are kind of my main businesses. And then finding time for just one-on-one coaching when I can, although it's, that's a lot of stuff to do. So I'm finding my time is is getting more and more squeezed. And I have a baby or a toddler. So I don't know if,
you have.
So that's,
you're a dad.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a lot of time as well. But of course, that's like the best. That's the most fun thing ever.
That's such an amazing vision. And thank you for sharing it with us today. Oh, by the way, I have your book
awesome.
here, which I highly recommend it to. Yeah, I highly recommend it to our audience. And my last question for you is, well, I'm not done with this yet, but I am halfway through it, and I find it very informative and amazing.
Great. That's awesome.
So I want you to let us know a little bit about the book and who can really benefit from it and where they can get it from. Exactly.
That's awesome. Thanks, Melika, for saying that too. It makes me feel really happy. And I think I wrote it because I was like, okay, I should have a book as an entrepreneur. I was convinced of this by a business mentor. But then I was like, what the hell am I going to write? Like, I don't, my work is face-to-face generally, or like this on Zoom. How do I put into writing what I normally say face-to-face? And so I realized, I was like, okay, I've got to extract my method, even though I didn't really have a solid method laid out in this way when I started writing the book. The book helped me come up with the method. And so what it does is it follows what I call the 5 acts of the out loud method, which are awareness, articulation, action, alignment, and automation. And those 5 steps are basically how we take somebody from being just having no idea how to speak effectively in public and being really nervous to being a powerful, confident communicator and storyteller. So it's those 5 steps. And the book is kind of written, the structure is Act 1 is about awareness, is also full of stories of where I learned these ideas from in my personal life. So stories about me traveling to Spain and China, stories that of like conflicts I had with people and feedback I've gotten, moments of like, shame. And I don't know if you can tell, but I tend to be like an oversharer or like a hefty sharer. I like to share a lot about my personal life, not because I get some like satisfaction of people knowing my secrets. I really believe it's a powerful thing you can do when you share difficult and scary things from your life, because it helps the person listening to feel less alone, because of course they have experiences they can relate. And when somebody goes first and says, hey, this fucked up thing happened to me, or this scary thing happened to me, or I have this fear or this doubt or this insecurity, when somebody does that, it creates precedent for the rest of the room or the rest of the online space or wherever they are to do that. So I just wanted to lead by example. So in the book, I talk about difficulties I've had, insecurities I've had, challenges I've had, but then I also provide the like framework of, okay, this is what you're going to learn. So that problem solution prize structure is in there. I talk about the big 5 human concerns: time, money, health, relationships, and emotional well-being, how you can create your stories and presentations around those topics so people really care. We talk about the 4 different types of investors: the visionary, the pragmatist, the theorist, and the empath. and how you can make sure your pitch is completely tailored so that every single one of them has something for them. There's stuff about how you can start to create content online and how you can start to get over it, what kind of videos you should be making, how to set up, how to get started. We talk about going deeper into your story, and we talk a lot about the cultural communication stuff I mentioned, which countries tend to be more individualistic, which tend to be more collectivist. So there's a great section there for ESL entrepreneurs because we talk about the cross-cultural communications. And finally, automation is about habit building. So based on books like Atomic Habits and The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, it's like, how can you build this stuff into your daily routine and start to get a habit going so that these lessons stick? Because of course I can work with you for an hour and I can point out everything that I think is good about the way you speak, is maybe holding you back, and give you all the exercises. But if you don't go home and practice them and apply them to your work, it's going to disappear, those lessons. So that's what Act 5 is all about, automation. And then, so a lot of personal stories and then kind of a walkthrough of my whole method. I like to say, like, if, it's like a $20 coaching course from me, where unfortunately we don't get to chat face to face, but you get all my stuff.
Oh, no, it's such an amazing one. And thank you very much for sharing. And thank you for writing that book. I'm sure a lot of people will find it very useful.
Yes, I hope.
Well, of course, if anyone wants to find you, Will, what would be the best way to get in touch with you or find you?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is the best in general because that's where I'm most active. And so if you DM me there or comment on something there, I'm most likely to see it rather than some other platforms that I'm less active on, like fucking TikTok, which is the big in the world. But it's like a different, I'm still kind of learning it, and maybe it'll be, maybe I'll be able to handle it at some point emotionally, but I'm not there yet. It just scares me and makes me sad. But yeah,
me neither.
It's wild. And you spend like 2 hours on it, just going like, and then you look up and you're like, crazy. What did I just do? And you feel worse. Anyways, LinkedIn, I think, is a bit better. I'm emotionally prepared for LinkedIn a lot more than I am for TikTok. I would also suggest, if you're listening to this and you haven't really started creating on LinkedIn, it's a really good time to start. It's still not a lot of active posters and active users, so you can still be found and kind of get noticed on LinkedIn. So at Will Greenblatt, and again, we can put it in the show notes. And then I have a newsletter called The Green Blast. And so if you go to greenblast.beehive.com, which is where I do my newsletter, I send out stuff every week. And that's also where I put all my first early bird stuff for the workshops and all that sort of thing.
That's amazing. Thank you very much. Well, you know what? This was such an amazing session. Amazing conversation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For
really
everything.
Good.